Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. I am so excited to be here with you today to talk about X-Men 97, the latest series on Disney Plus, the revival of X-Men, the animated series from the 90s. And I am even more excited today with this group of incredible people that I have. We have with us today, rising like the phoenix herself, Dina Hamdieh, the eye of the storm, Miriam Ibrahim, and our rogue in waiting, Raevin Larue. Welcome, everybody. I am so thrilled to have everyone together tonight. I'm very excited about this one.
Yeah, same.
Totally looking forward to it. Yeah.
Always a good time, always.
As I said, X-Men 97 is the revival of the animated series and picks up immediately after the events of the iconic series that was canceled back in the 90s, and tells the story of a band of mutants who use their uncanny gifts to protect a world that hates and fears them. They're challenged like never before, forced to face a dangerous and unexpected new future.
Magneto.
The last will and testament of Charles Xavier. Everything he built now belongs to me.
As always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. And I should say that at the time of this recording, we have only seen, or only the first 5 episodes have aired. I'm not sure if you've all seen all 5 episodes, but that's the only 5. So we're only halfway through the season at this point. But I am dying to hear what you all think of X-Men 97.
I'm not going first.
No?
No.
Right, go ahead, Mir.
I'll go first. Let me tell you, the X-Men of the 90s was the X-Men of my childhood, and some of the movies haven't been so great. So I am so happy about this coming back, because it's like taking a bath in nostalgia. I've loved it. Yeah, the stories lines are sometimes a little bit weird. We'll get into that, but I was like, Nightcrawler, Emma Frost. Oh, look over there! Like, it was just really exciting.
When Emma made her debut in episode 5, I was like, oh, let's go! And Scott's already starting to spiral, so I just know they're about to explore that storyline. I hope so.
Oh,
anyway.
I hope so. Oh, Raven,
Yeah.
you have no idea. That would be incredible.
Oh.
I loved it. I'm the same boat as Miriam. Like, I liked, because remember, this is going to be a shorter series, like a shorter number of episodes. Obviously, we've had much too much in the 90s of X-Men. It was like 20-minute. I think it's 20 minutes each. Now it's 30 minutes. Like, there's more to explore. So I was really happy about that. But they kept some of the same character history and then added more, which I loved. And then they added new characters, which I loved. And the animations were amazing, which I also loved. So I have no complaints. I thought it was excellent. Obviously, episode 5 blew my mind, but yeah, it was I wasn't ready for such tragedy so early on. So,
and it's like halfway through, like
Yeah.
Steve said, it's not like, oh, okay, this is the end of the season. You're like,
I'm like,
where are
I'm
they
not
going to
ready.
take it from here? Yeah.
Emotionally, I was not ready. So,
Yeah.
but I think this is a game changer for Marvel. To be
Yeah,
honest.
Marvel Animation's killing it.
Yeah.
They're killing it.
Yeah. This is, if I have to say, this is like the Infinity War. This is like leading up to our Avengers Endgame moment. This is it, and it's animation, and that's mind blowing. And so I don't say that lightly. Stephen Mir, no, I'm very pessimistic lately after Infinity War with movies, but and the shows. But now it's hope all restored, and it's animation, and I love that. So I can't complain. Yeah, can't complain at all.
Yeah, I agree. Episode 5 definitely wrecked me. I'm really happy to see this show back. I love that they have elevated the visuals, but it still feels like that 90s Saturday morning kind of vibe. I love hearing the original voice actors back. Like, it's like music to my ears. And I love that the writing is eating every episode. The writing is just like beautiful, so good. They're really diving into what makes each individual character special. And I think it's hard when you have that many characters to explore, yet every single one of them feels authentic to the source material, but also different and of their own. And yeah, this is what X-Men should be. This is what it
Yeah.
should feel like when you read it, when you watch it. I was saying to Steve, like, I think it was last night, the movies are an atrocity. And even though I like X-Men 1 and 2, I do love it because for nostalgic reasons.
Yeah.
But I don't personally believe Marvel will ever be able to successfully adapt X-Men for live action the way you can do it with animation. There's just too much of these characters unless you do it as a series, but we know how those series are going on Disney Plus.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. No, I think that the heavy dark tone to this, the almost horror to this was incredible. I don't even like, to me, it's almost, they got me to cry. It's an animation. I was scared. It's an animation. Like they did the work. And I absolutely agree about the writing, Raven, because there were some lines from this that I loved. So, and it's true to the actual comics, but I loved that they mentioned them in some of them. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But Steve, what did you think?
I think that you guys hate too much in the Marvel TV series, but anyway, no.
Always on me on this. I know.
Always on you on this one. Okay, so just to poke a hole in the love fest, just for a moment. No, because it was the same problem I had with the original series.
Look
And
at this
Raevin
mansplaining starting already. Wow.
It's not mansplaining.
I'm just teasing you, Steve. I love you. I love you. I'm just joking.
And scene.
Thank you for joining us this week. No. It's the same problem I have with the original series. And it's a kids show, so I really should have no beef with this. But they cram a lot into 30 minutes. That episode with Madeline Pryor gave me whiplash.
Yeah.
Because so much happened in 30 minutes. And it was a lot of fun. I will preface this by saying I've been very impressed with this series. But when they hit the gas pedal, they hit the gas pedal. And the original series did the same thing.
Yeah.
So I was going back and rewatching some of the old episodes before this one came out. And I was like, man, they just make things happen. Like that Madeline Pryor episode could have been the arc for a whole season.
Yeah.
And they did it in 30 minutes.
But
and I was like, now again, like it's a kid's show. Well, is it a kid's show?
It's not a kid's show.
No,
I've been
it's not a
watching it with
kid's
my
show.
9-year-old, and I've been like, maybe
Yeah,
it's a little
it's
mature
not.
for him, but he thinks it's the greatest thing he's ever seen.
Was it ever a kid's show though?
No, the original wasn't either. No, it's way too deep and intense. Yeah.
But that was the 90s. There was more in the 90s that was willing to do that. Remember, like Batman the Animated Series was the same thing.
Yeah.
That was a mature show.
Batman was really intense, I thought, for kids.
Yeah. But the original series did a lot of two-parters. Like there was a lot of like, remember the whole, my favorite was the Logan Search for Spirituality storyline. That was like a two-parter.
Yeah.
And right. So they do cram a lot in, but they also did a lot of like part 1, part 2. And so it
should have been 2 parts for sure.
Yeah. Like
sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think they're only doing 10 episodes this season.
10 now, 10 for 2. They're negotiating on season 3 and 4 right now.
But the last 3 episodes are a part 1, 2, 3, and are going to be released together.
Oh,
yeah, I looked it up.
8, 9, 10?
So right now we're at 7. We're at 5. Next week will be 6. Then they'll release 7, and then 8, 9, 10. I think on like May something, beginning of May, show up on the same day because they're part 1, part 2, part 3.
I can't take any more devastation, so I don't know what to prepare for now.
Yeah. Raven messages me after episode 5, and I don't know if I've said this before, but as always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. But after message, she said, "Episode 5 is so emotional. If you don't cry, you may be a monster." And so she messaged me. She said, "Did you cry?" I said, "No, I'm a monster."
Oh dear. Yeah.
Listen, Leech, like,
yeah,
been my man since day 1, since I was a little 9-year-old watching this show. Okay, the way that even the X-Men treated the Morlocks to me was just like abysmal. Like, just I didn't love how they had to be convinced to respect them. but Leech is like the heart. Like he has so much
Mhm.
faith and belief. And of all the people who doubted Magneto, Leech has always seen Magneto for the true hero that he has always been, because he advocates for his people. And Leech has loved him for that. So when he was like, "They're gonna come save us, they're coming for us," and then to see my man like be on him about to die, and he's just like, "Don't worry." No,
Yeah.
like the disrespect to my feelings, it was too much. I was sobbing like a baby. I sent him like it's just so much. Like I was crying in the voice note. I'm like, it's so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that that's
was
what made you cry. But I love,
Yeah.
because to me it was like, oh, Gambit is like dead, and also like Rogue is like, I can't feel you, and that kind of
Yeah.
gave me
Oh,
like
that made me
Wanda
cry too.
vibes. Yeah, I was like Wanda and
Oh,
Vision vibes,
Wanda
and I was
vibes.
like, wait a
Ooh.
minute, like when she was like, I can't feel you. I think
Yeah.
that was, but yeah, that was to
She
me kind
say
of
I
sad.
can't or I can?
I
I thought
can't.
That
I
was her
can't.
last line.
Wanda said that with
The
the Vision
Wanda
in the
did.
series.
Does
Yeah, and
Rogue
No,
also
say-
Rogue.
but
We were
Rogue did as
debating that in
well.
our
It's
family.
the last
Yeah.
line, right?
Yeah, it's the last line.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
thought the point was that she can touch him now.
No.
No,
Can't feel him because
he's
he's
dead.
burnt.
You can feel him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
His legs were cut off, Steve. He had no legs. It's so devastating.
Listen, okay, I think this is why I didn't. This is why I'm a monster. I didn't cry because they brought Cable in, and I'm
Well,
like, well, Cable's there, so they're obviously going to roll this whole thing back. Like he's going to
Oh, yeah, we
back
know
to the
what's
future
coming.
this stuff.
Oh,
they-
yeah.
That's what I said the
they-
first time. I was like,
And
They
the
okay.
will
connection to
later, maybe.
Apocalypse potentially, right? And so the repeating
Yeah,
of the
but-
story arc to try and fix it. Yeah.
Because doesn't he say
Apocalypse-
like, "Oh no, I'm too late"? Isn't that what he said, or something
He
to that
He says,
effect?
I'm sorry.
He says, I'm
so
sorry.
But I
Yeah.
think he can go back in time. Maybe there's another episode. Apocalypse showed up to everything. Like, can we just
Yeah.
talk about that in the whole
Yeah.
series? Like, I'm not, like, if he showed up, I would have been like, this is boring. I'm glad they
Again,
surprised us with
Yeah.
things that we wouldn't have expected. I heard, I'm sorry, Raven, but I heard the later episodes are even more devastating. I don't know what's coming, but this
Oh
is what
my
I've heard,
gosh.
is that there's more. I don't know if something happens to Jubilee or something, like some beloved character. But yeah, that's what I've been
Well,
hearing. But
Because Jubilee, like, I think the neat thing they're doing is they don't focus on every character every episode, right? So
Yeah.
there's like, we had Storm, and now we haven't heard from
Yeah.
Storm in a couple of episodes. We had Jubilee, and how much like did you like? I literally cheered as I was watching when they go into the video game and the graphics change, and you're like, oh, "It's Nintendo!" Like you
yes, Nintendo. That was the
Yeah.
best part.
Yeah.
That was the best part. Like,
Yeah.
I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I think that Mojo is amazing. I love the whole, like, he lost weight and then he was just sucking it in and holding it in, and all of a sudden he's big again. Like, I loved everything when he was like, oh, Dazzler had a thing, like, don't ask or whatever. Like, I was like, it's just the little things that got me about him being like a TV producer. It was like that mood.
Yeah.
That was like, I loved the personality, and it's just true to everything around bringing in the different characters to have them fight, and then, you know, putting it on TV and making money off of them. It's so mainstream media, and like tying it back to that. It's just awesome. I just thought that whole bit was super, super cool. So
Yeah.
I love
It also
Mojo.
felt like a
Mojo
sequel.
is my favorite. He's funny.
It also felt like a sequel to the very first episode, right? Because this is like
Mhm.
there was a lot of frames in this
Mhm.
episode that mimicked when we first
Yeah.
met. But it was like a response to, okay, now you got to grow up, girl. You can still have your youthful heart, but you got to grow up. And I thought that was really nice, because I
Yeah.
think that means she's going to have a pretty intense storyline probably in the rest of the
Yeah,
season. But she's
probably.
still very juvenile, right? Which is great.
Mm.
What,
And
she's
they
18
made sure to suggest,
Yeah.
like, say this is her 18th birthday, so you
Yeah.
know, she's stepping into adulthood for the first time. Like, this is where she's going.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Very true.
you know, going back to the animation there for a second, one thing that's very much impressed me is that it's a new animation, but you know, you talked about it being old. There's lag. I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
this is,
Yes.
I actually
love it.
appreciate that. I'm like,
Same.
this is weird that I like this, but I mean, this
Yeah.
is, if you're going to make a legacy show and say, no, this is what it was,
Yeah,
it
keep it
better
authentic. Yeah.
feel like it was. And
Yeah.
it does have that, like, watching, there's just a slight, even though it's smoother and faster, there's a slight lag in times.
Yeah.
Mhm.
which I was like, well, this is really good.
Yeah.
It also, like, so I don't know about you all, but what happens to me is, like, when they remake something, usually it just makes me want to go back and so the remake of like Dirty Dancing, and I'm like, I just want to go back and watch the original. Or when they did the live musical Sound of Music, I was like, oh, I just want to go back and watch the original, because it's never quite the same. Like, even when it's almost identical, you're like, this just makes me want the original. And I think, to your point, because they make it like smoother and modern, just because we are more modern, but it loses then the sense of it. And so what I loved about this is, like, I loved the originals, but at no point was I like, oh, this just makes me want to go back and watch those. I'm enjoying this for itself, right? Yeah.
And it wasn't cringe. It wasn't like, oh my God, too much CGI, or like, it's like too much. So it's funny that you say that, Steve, because who's the guy, the writer, the DeMaio Bo, the guy that got fired from the series, actually. Yes.
Yeah.
So he actually said that he loved that the AI and technology had come a long way, because now they could actually make the Sentinels look, because the Sentinels back in the day, it was like, oh, they look like the shape of the house. Like, everything was like weirdly,
Lego blockish.
Yes. And so now they can make it a little bit better. So I think there's probably a lag and it seems authentic, but they did fix up some things that made it even better, that to us we wouldn't have noticed, but now it would have looked a bit, it's always going to be campy. That's the whole point. Like, I love that about it. But I agree. I love that there is maybe a little bit of lag. It was campy because they could get away with it. That's the best part. You can't get away with that with the movies, because then, well, people like me would get up and walk out.
I wonder if too,
I love your passion.
Oh, don't worry, you'll see more of it.
This is Dina getting warmed up.
Wait till the rage comes. Wait till the rage comes. Yeah.
But I wonder, and this is, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm just thinking about this now because, Raevin, to your point about them not being able to do this with the cinematic universe, I wonder if the point is that this is lower risk. So, for example,
100%.
like with the animation here, and I'm not saying they didn't put money in, because it looks great. You don't have to reach all 4 quadrants. You don't have to appeal to every fan base. You don't have to make $1 billion now. You can put this in and say, hey, we're throwing it back to people that liked it then, and we're going to bring the qualities about that and hope it sinks now. And it's landing, and I mean, the reviews are off the charts for it. It's been fabulous.
Yeah.
But it's also much lower risk than releasing a film like The Marvels, we talked about before, which has its pros and its cons. But with Marvels, you have to try it. There's that pressure, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's pressure with this one too, but it's different. They're not going to make any more or less money through Disney Plus because of this. I don't know.
I totally agree with you. I love that you said that, because it's actually, and the funny part is with the Disney shows, we had a bit of a problem with, we knew who the villain was right away. With this, there's this, like, I don't know, is it Sinister? Is it Cassandra Cronova? Like, I don't know who it is, and I'm waiting, because right now I just know that, nothing ever happens to the X-Men up until episode 5. And now after that, it's like, does it get worse? Who makes it worse? Right? And so
worse, they just
like
killed half of them.
No, I'm just saying they have to fight somebody. Somebody's got to come.
Well, but also, like Steve, you were saying, it's super fast paced. They're cramming a lot in a half hour. Maybe they had to kill all these people off to slow the pace down now that they've got us hooked.
I love that.
They've got to end their characters so they have less story to tell.
Right?
It's just going to be Cyclops. It's just him.
That's it. Yeah.
I was telling Steve, like, actually, Steve and I had a very philosophical discussion about Cyclops the other day, because I've never been a fan of Cyclops, like, at all. But Steve kind of made an argument for him that made me realize, okay, maybe I'm coming a little too hard, like, about this guy, because he can't catch a break. Like, I never liked Scott, because he always had this, like, I need to be the guy. Like, I need to be the leader. I need to be the next Charles Xavier. And I just always felt like, but you don't got it, boo. Like, you just don't have the za that you need to be that. Like, it's just not in you. You're too insecure. You need too much validation. And he's a good leader, but there are better leaders in the X-Men. Like
Agreed.
half of his purpose in life comes from being validated by these two women, Charles
Mhm.
Xavier, people he cares about. He doesn't like lean into himself for that validation. And I just always thought that made him kind of a jackass, because I always felt like Cyclops, when he does go through his emotional outbursts, it's just like 0 to 100. One day he's your leader, the next minute he's just like, no, screw you guys. Nobody respects me. I'm out of here. Emma's my bitch now. Fuck you guys. Like he has those
Mic
ridiculous
drop.
responses. Like he just is. I can't with him. But Steve explained to me, he's like, mans can't catch a break though. Like nothing as good as
Yeah.
that in life.
So true.
So
But don't you also feel like, so I can appreciate this sense of like he has a deep sense of responsibility. And so he's trying to be perfect for all of the people that he feels responsible to. And he keeps trying and trying and trying. And then suddenly he hits that that point where he's like, okay, that's it. And then it's like the straw that broke the camel's back, and come at all of it. I think that's why he goes from what it seems like from 0 to 100. It's because all of like the buildup is happening. He's just trying to hold it in so nobody can see it.
I don't think that's what it is though with Scott, because yes, he has a strong sense of responsibility for everybody, but it's his needs that he's trying to fulfill first, which is if these are the center of my world, then they'll give me the respect and like that I need. So Scott's not really driven entirely by being the leader of the X-Men or being a good X-Men, although it seems like they're exploring this. Maybe I'm wrong with this series, but I've never felt like Scott was as good a guy as he presented to be. Just as like I felt Charles Xavier wasn't really a great leader, but I think he's more selfish than anything, and that's why he's always leaving when he's having a bad day, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge Cyclops fan either. I haven't been. But the only thing that hasn't happened to him this season is him getting kicked in the groin. That's the only thing that hasn't happened to him. Like Beast just needs to come up and kick him in the crotch, and that's and then be like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
This guy has been stripped of everything.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, like even in the films, I laugh because there was a period in James Marsden's career where he always played the guy who lost the girl.
Yeah.
Like, he even left X-Men to go film Superman, where he played the guy who loses the girl.
Yeah.
It just seemed like this was just his career path. But like, so I feel kind of bad for him, but now he is the guy, right? He was the guy for 5 minutes.
Oh, I know.
Like, and then it's like, oh yeah, I didn't leave the X-Men to you. It's like, oh,
Great.
so
Thanks.
my pseudo dad doesn't support me now. My
surprise,
wife
married
is a
to a
clone.
clone. Yeah.
It's like my baby's in the future.
Yeah.
This dude is that's why I said to Raven, I said I really actually like that he broke down on TV.
Yeah.
I was like, he's not the man to be doing press for you right now. I'm sorry.
Right.
He's like, you all don't deserve us. Like,
yeah, revolutionary Scott is all I will say is gonna be coming. So what happens when you have that much stress on you is what do you turn into? And I think that he'll be leaning towards Magneto a little bit more, which may make Raven happy. Yeah.
Sure.
So I think you'll be happy. So again, like if we're talking about the comics and what happens, I don't know what they're gonna pull out. They're surprised us already, but there is a world where Magneto brings Scott on whatever side it is, dark or light. I don't know what Raven believes, but I like Magneto. I always have. But
do you think we're seeing the genuine Magneto, like, or is this just the ruse to then turn back into the villain that he usually is?
Can I just say I'm jealous of Magneto's hair?
Oh my God, everything.
As a middle-aged man, I'm looking at him like, dude's got hair.
The flowing
but
locks.
It's not. Yeah. I mean, we'll get into the Rogue Magneto situation in a second because there's some like cringe grounds that we're gonna touch on. But yes, he's a good looking. Listen, I dig it. I like the outfits, the body, the hair. Yeah, all of it works. But are we getting into the Magneto
You can if you want.
conversation now? Raven, did you want to start?
Or are we
Yeah,
talking? Wait,
okay.
what are you talking about? Magneto and Rogue, or you want to talk about
Oh, Magneto and Rogue.
Magneto's
Yeah, we can
role?
if you want. I thought you were just going to say Magneto versus Professor X, but yeah, we can
I
get
do want to
into
talk
whatever.
about that. And Raven and I
Yeah.
had a wonderful conversation about this before. And this is why, Raven, I said to them, I said, beforehand, I said, I know that that you love Magneto, is what I told them. And I would love to hear what you all think of this, because with Professor X gone, Magneto now is in this place, but there's still this tension between the Professor X's way and Magneto's way. I'd love to hear what you think about those things. Anybody?
I think he's sus. I'm probably the only person who does, but
He probably is
Magneto?
sus. Probably is. He
Yeah.
probably is sus.
like there's just, because like if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, like it's a duck. And so Magneto's MO is in his passion for his people. So it comes from a good motivation, but his actions typically screw a lot of people over, including some of his own people. But so far, all 5 of these episodes, that is not the Magneto we're seeing. In fact, even to Raven's point about like with the Morlocks at the moment of his death and being like, don't be afraid. Right? Like it's beautiful. And I don't know if this is a genuine redemption arc or it's just, the ruse that, then in a fit of anger, the old Magneto is going to come back. I don't know. So I think he's a bit sus. That's where I've landed.
I never thought Magneto was a villain though, ever. So,
Yeah.
and I think that with that moment with him and Leech, that's always what Magneto's been about, is his people. Because Magneto's character is modeled after Malcolm X, who has been historically inaccurately villainized. And then Charles Xavier was modeled after Martin Luther King Jr. So the idea that Magneto is a villain, to me, is a way to, how do I say this? It's a way to suggest that fighting for your own people is not the right way. When his people were brutalized, they were murdered, his parents were, he was in a concentration camp. His parents were killed in a concentration camp. So for someone like Charles Xavier to come along and say, no, I know you've suffered, but this is not the right way. The person who benefits from the oppressor does not get to tell you how to deal with your grief. So for Magneto, when he saw all his people persecuted, why wouldn't he then fight for their liberation? Just because Charles Xavier seems to have the more philosophical approach to peace, to me, that's offensive. And that's always been the offense to Magneto. But it's easy to villainize him because he's not aligned with the goals of everybody else. When in reality, he doesn't need to be. Because when their goals were aligned to kill all his people, mutants and Jewish people, they didn't. So I don't feel like Magneto is a villain. I don't think his approach to anything was ever wrong. I think that it's the pillars of white supremacy, which is what the anti-mutant world is kind of rooted in.
Representing, yeah.
It's the pillars of white supremacy that tell the oppressed that the way you respond to your oppression is not right. And that's, to me, what Charles Xavier always represented. So that's why I like Magneto.
Yeah, I guess for me, so I hear you. I think that's a beautiful allegorical connection. And I struggled with this in like some of the activism versus advocacy kind of realities that we live in today as well. I think though, when as a people who've experienced oppression, your response perpetuates oppression, you've just shifted who's being oppressed. That's not the right way to respond. And so that, I think, can be a bit of the struggle is I struggle when in a response to oppression, which is oppression not okay without, I'm not at all suggesting it is, but if my response to oppression is just to then turn around and oppress somebody else, then I'm not actually doing the good that I hope that I'm doing. or being allowed to live through my trauma response in a way that is healing. I'm just creating trauma elsewhere. I'm redirecting that trauma. And I think that can be problematic.
But I don't think Magneto ever tried to oppress humans. What he did was he said, leave my people alone or I'll come for you. And humans never left his people alone. So he kept
So he was
coming.
like, all right, I'm doing exactly what I
If
told you I was
if
going to
you
do.
go
Yeah.
back to like the source material, Magneto has always come with a disclaimer. I don't have issues with you, but if you keep hurting my people, if you keep trying to experiment on mutants, kill us,
Right.
eradicate us, take away our powers, humiliate us, then I'm going to use full force in you. Then Charles would come and be like, but no, we have to be better than them. What group of people tells oppressed people they need to be better than the
You need
oppressor?
to, yeah.
White people, white oppressor. So this is the pillar of white supremacy, and this is what X-Men explores so beautifully. So by Charles putting Magneto in charge, I feel like maybe that was, I guess they said in episode 5, this was his last effort to get Magneto to do things his way. But Magneto is the best choice for the X-Men because as we saw in episode 3, or when did Rogue get her powers taken? When he zipped those guys up, the people in Congress up to
That was the
space. He's
second
like, listen,
episode. That was 2, I
second
think.
Yeah.
episode. He said, listen, keep fucking with me. And you know what I can do to you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Magneto's never been, ever been an oppressor, but he will respond in an appropriate way that Charles Xavier would never do. So that's why I've always liked him. But this goes back to how they villainized Malcolm X, especially during the civil rights era. It was easy to present Malcolm X as an aggressive, angry black man who didn't want peace. Well, why would he? Why would he? Segregation ended like 5 years ago. You guys took us off the plantation. Now you have Jim Crow laws. My people can't thrive. Magneto says my people cannot thrive. Every time we make a step towards in the right direction to work with you people, you come back and you do some crazy shit. At what point do we say, screw y'all? They built an island for mutants. Humans bombed it.
Yeah.
Like, is Magneto really a villain? And I feel like we should be looking at him in this perspective, specifically during this political time, because how much more should people have to take from the powers that be? But I'm also a radical, so I'm a radical.
No,
so.
I think one of the lines I think in the show that I really liked was it was like most other nations don't allow terrorists to be their leaders, but a lot of nations allow leaders to be terrorists. And I thought that was like back to the way that the show was written. Like I love that because it's very relevant, right? We see today, it's like we wouldn't allow a terrorist to be a leader, but then we watch leaders and well, they are a bit of terrorists, but we just allow that to happen because they're massive as leaders. And so I really love that line in the show that kind of ties back to this in a way.
So they ate with that line too. When Magneto was just like, like he ate with that. I'm like, okay.
I know, I'm telling you that speech.
Yeah.
That line, that was lit.
Yeah.
What do you think,
True.
Steve? Steve kind of gave me a different perspective on Charles. I still don't really mess with Charles, but what do you think, Steve?
Well, actually, you know what? You gave me some perspective on Charles when we talked about it before, because I think I agree with you that Charles was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. I agree with that in comparison to Magneto. Well, in general, he was born into wealth. I'm trying to remember what I said now. If it was so good, I think
my argument for Charles was like, Charles is like the son of a former plantation owner who said, Dad, it's not okay to own slaves. But then the former slave says, okay, give me my land back, Charles. And Charles is like, whoa. I've been here for a minute though. So maybe we can do halfway. That's how I feel Charles is when he treats mutants or mutant liberation and goes against Magneto. So, but you said, because I also said that his experience could not be ever compared to Magneto's, but you had brought up a good point. He's like, well, maybe his experience with anti-mutant, what's the word they use? Anti-mutanism or whatever, is not equal. He still did suffer in his own ways. So maybe he's not as bad as my comparison. So
that's right. What I said, that's right. What I suggested is that he's still experiencing oppression. Like it's not, I'm not comparing it to Magneto's. But the whole point of Xavier is he's fighting these battles at the legislative level. He's fighting it with the government. And he's still getting blocked out. he's still fighting those battles. And one of the things I was thinking about this too after our conversation, one of the things I like about Xavier is his school for the gifted isn't trying to make mutants necessarily, it wasn't trying to make them fit in. He's trying to help them be themselves. And he's not telling the mutants, he's like, oh, hide. He has a different level of different type of pride in his mutant classes, if you will. So he still has that pride of mutant abilities, but it differs with Magneto. And this is what I've always loved about the Charles Magneto dynamic, is because at times they're both right and at times they're both wrong.
Yeah.
Like there are times like when Magneto is being full on Magneto where I totally agree with him. Absolutely agree with him. I'm hearing him speak, I'm hearing his pain, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. And there's other times where I say, I side the same way with Charles at the same time, and I see Charles's flaws and I see Magneto's flaws. I had the same thought as you, Mir, that sometimes you don't want to create a new oppressed, and you battle for strength.
Yeah.
But it's not about getting a seat at the table. It's really about building a new table. So how do you do that? What's the best way to do that? It's not just about validate everybody else's systems and say, hey, we're here. But neither is it, but you need people on the other side who are willing to say, let's build something new.
Yeah.
But the thing is,
oh, go ahead.
the thing is, though, mutants don't need humans. And this is really what it comes down to. And this is the same thing that comes up in every X-Men comic when you think of who the villain is. Mutants don't need humans. Magneto proposed Genosha in the beginning, and he built it, and the humans bombed it. Why? Because of their hate, but also because they want something from the X-Men, whether they want them to not have their power, whether they want them to want to take their DNA so they can create weapons. And this is very similar to the same storyline in Black Panther 2, right? Wakanda said, okay, we'll open ourselves up to you and help you. We don't need to, but we will. And what did the government do? They started sneaking into Wakanda, taking their, this is all metaphor for how oppressed communities, people of color, continue to get used and abused by our colonial white supremacist system, right? So Pan-Africanism was a movement that was very big. I mean, it came up a lot of times, but very big in the 70s. It was kind of after the civil rights, Pan-Africanism went on the rise in the 70s, 80s. But that was a way for Black Americans to reconnect to their African roots. Black Panther Party came on the rise to protect Black neighborhoods from corrupt police officers and police brutality. What did the FBI do? They planted drugs in their communities. Yeah. They dismantled their schools, their families. They planted fake things that didn't happen to make these Black Americans look like they were aggressive. Why? Because it's about control. It's about taking something from this community, because these white people or whoever participates in this crazy racism, right? They want something from these people. You cannot exist without us because we need you. And this is why Eric, in my opinion, will never be the bad guy, because he said time and time again, I don't want to hurt you, but I will. And then there were many times Eric said, okay, Charles, let's do it your way. More mutants died because of Charles' inability to listen to Magneto more, to take more control, to protect mutants. Eric could have said, you know what, there was actually a story where Eric said, I'll take us off planet for Christ's sakes to protect us. Charles was like, don't do that. We have to work with the humans. Why should oppressed groups have to work in the parameters of the oppressor's needs? What do they want? Something from the oppressed. So I just feel like this series is so good right now. And it's so relevant during this time, because these are the conversations that it's trying to make people have. And the more you know about history and racism and white supremacy and colonialism, the more you can apply it to real life issues that are happening today. But I'm kind of worried though that in our current climate, that perhaps those messages and conversations won't happen, because it's not like the 90s where things were so like aspirational. I want to be a hero, where the bad guy was clear. Also in the 90s, we weren't listening. Well, I mean, I was, but I grew up Black, but it wasn't popular to listen to Black voices or the voices of oppressed groups, Latinx groups, immigrant voices, right? So when you put white faces on oppressed groups, you make them think, oh, we're the oppressed people. We have to work in the parameters to have a peaceful world, just like Charles says. And Eric is the bad guy. Back in the 90s, we could not conceptualize that Eric was in fact not the bad guy, because there was really no empathy for oppressed groups, right? Because the pillar of white supremacy is to take control of the problem they created and then create a new narrative. But now we know who the bad guys are in the world today. We know who they are. But the concept of truth and everybody thinking they're a victim when they're not, or the oppressed group, has been so muddled that I worry that these themes that the show is exploring will not fully be received in the way that they should. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know that everybody will make, hopefully now that everybody's listening to the podcast, they will, but will make the same connections as you've kind of laid them out, right? Or like, I certainly had no idea that Magneto was modeled after Malcolm X, or that Professor X was modeled after Martin Luther King Jr. Like, that's new information to me. And so that changes the filter through which I'm understanding what we've been watching, right?
Mm-hmm. Stanley does a good interview on it. Let me try to find it. I can send it in the group chat, because it was trending on TikTok the other day too. But because he talks about it at a panel. But yeah, what do you guys think? I'm kind of dominating the conversation here. Tap in, guys. Tap in.
Well, as a white male, I think I understand, and
Go on.
let me tell you what I think.
Yeah.
I want to hear from the upper left corner.
Yeah, you're so quiet.
Dina's real
Me?
quiet. Yeah.
I am listening. No, I've always loved Magneto. I like the dark side. I like the light side. I like when he wakes up and chooses violence. I do, because, well, anyway, reasons. But I also like him because of the history of how he came about, right? The concentration camps, the Holocaust. They couldn't talk about that in the comics. And I was actually never even mentioned it. It was just kind of there. It happened. You knew there was background, but they weren't allowed to really talk about it back then, right? We have to talk about the context of when these comic books came out, when they were written. And so they never really mentioned it. And I think his history of the never again, right? The never again of it all. And that was powerful, because that's what he believes in, right? He believes that never again, it happened to my people before, I'm not going to let it happen again. And he carries that with him. I do think that, again, when you look at the Malcolm X and you look at the kind of the parallels we draw, we can see the good and bad in both sides in different moments, right? And I can see the fight being there. And I do agree with you, Steve, about I can see them both being right and I can see them both being wrong in different circumstances. To me, Magneto fights with his people, right? Whereas Charles just sort of does the thing and can maybe, I don't know, do something, and then it's like done or whatever. But like, you can tell Magneto fights with his people, and it's sort of togetherness, right? I personally think that when he got arrested, and he, the trial of Magneto is actually in the comics, and that's a thing, and he goes and says, will it be a trial that will bring, the right justice, and I'll be heard, and he even said in his trial, what they're mad at you, right? They're coming in here because you've given me a trial. And that to me is a huge thing, is that we don't typically hear the other side. Most of the time, we just think that our side is, but having the conversation where we're giving him a platform to just even give the speech he gave and be heard, I think that was really important, at least messaging for me on that we have to come together and listen to each other. But also when Storm loses her powers, which was heartbreaking, by the way, I actually do want to talk about that a little bit, but and Forge as well, of how they kind of in the comics, like, they go away and get her powers back. But when Magneto takes them all up, all these leaders, right, in the UN, takes them all up outside so you can go up to look down to see what you actually need to see. This is what it's all about. I thought that was really powerful because we're so in our bubble, and he actually took them out of that and said, look down, because this is what it was about, right? And really, this is what Charles was trying to protect too, but we have to take you up for you to see down into the full picture. And so, no, I mean, I see it differently. I did see a lot of messaging in the show as I was watching it. Obviously, Raven, like if you're not blind, or you're trying to avoid the messaging, it's there, right? And I think it's purposeful that when they rushed into the UN, right, they made the reference to insurrection. Like there is a lot of parallels to what is happening in our world today. So I'm hoping people will see what the parallels are, but also take away that we just need to listen to each other, because Magneto got a trial, even though he's viewed as a terrorist, and he saved a lot of people. And so, to Raven's point, I never really saw him as a bad guy, but I always thought he was cool, that he could just say, like, he could just do this and the helicopters will turn on people and weapons turn on you when they come to arrest him. I thought that was always cool. Wanda had that. I thought that was cool. So to me, that's really my thoughts on Magneto. I just think he's awesome. He's powerful. And what he did with Rogue is just, well, it's a little sus and creepy from when she was like 16 years old. And in Savage Land, whatever, it's fine when she's younger.
Is she that young?
They just skipped over that, eh? They just was like, oh, this is normal, but it's like, she was a child.
Cringe.
Like, that was cringe.
Yeah.
Just a little bit cringy. I think he was born in 1930s. She was 1970 something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cringe.
Yeah.
There's a 40-year age gap.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Cringe. All the cringe. And then I guess when she mentioned to Gambit, which I love, I actually love Gambit in this, by the way. And not a lot of people like Gambit in the movies, but in the comics, but he's actually great in this. I'm sad he's gone. But which she says to him, right? Magneto didn't want me to not have a family, and so he didn't say anything, right, to all of you, because he wanted me to have you as my family. And so I think anyway. So at the end, she ends up choosing Gambit, but Gambit will never know it. But yeah, I do
until
think
Cable brings him back. I'm telling you, it's
yes.
until
And
time reverses.
Magneto comes back too. Magneto's not dead, I'm convinced. So there was no body, there's no proof.
Take my
at least. Yeah, I will. I'll make all of it happen.
And it's all in you, okay? It's your job.
It's not me, I wish. But time travel in this is really cool. I like the concept. I think there's an opportunity to bring everybody back. Maybe Rex will come back, but anyway. Yeah,
well, I hope
so that's my thought on that.
I hope they follow the storyline where Rogue and Gambit get married. Like, I really hope that like there's when Rogue becomes Omega level. It's been a long time since I read this one. But basically, Rogue and Gambit have to fight their clone. Like, they're not their, well, I guess they're clones of their former selves, but they have to fight them all off. But it's kind of about them working through some past issues that they haven't been able to get past. But by the end of it, they're like, okay, we make up, and then they finally get married, and it's just like a really lovely end to their story.
Yeah.
Rogue can now touch him, and it's just, so I hope we get that. I hope we get that in the show.
Well, he's gone. I'm hoping he comes back, but if they take away Rogue in any of these episodes, I will riot, because I love Rogue. I find her fascinating. I always have. I dressed up as her at Comic-Con one year, and anyway, Savage Land was like a really cool, interesting run, because she loses her powers and she's with Magneto, creepy city. And he takes advantage, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, no, I love Rogue so much. I love everything about her character. She can do a lot in this if they play their cards right. No pun intended for Gambit, but yes. I'll be here all night. Anyway,
don't you think so? Don't you think though that if we're using Cable to reset the timeline, like it resets the timeline, I think it would be cruel to like bring Magneto back and leave everybody else dead, or bring so and so back but leave like
they'll bring everyone back.
They need to, right?
Like they'll be like the Avengers Endgame. They'll just bring everyone back. Everyone will show up. Yeah.
Well, because imagine like having to pick and choose who you bring back, but who you don't. Like that doesn't sit right. Yeah.
I'm not taking anything away from the moment, but it was because it was really well done. Yeah. But they're gonna just fix it. I'm sure. I'm not even worried for these guys.
You know who I don't want to see join the X-Men in this series ever? Kitty Pryde, because I can't stand her.
That's
She's the worst. She's the
You don't like
worst.
Kitty Pryde, but you like a girl who's
I
got
like her.
fireworks for her power as fireworks. Like, is that?
Jubilee.
Lee is amazing. Leave her alone. Okay, she's amazing. We love her. Kitty Pryde is pretentious. All right, she's pretentious. And one of like I think it was X-Men Blue. Was it X-Men Black? Anyway, Scott takes over one version of the X-Men. They're like done with the gifted house, and Kitty Pryde becomes a leader of the X-Men who stay at the house or at the school. And that whole arc, I was just like, the two worst people ever leading the X-Men in an entire series. I think it was like a 20-part series. I'm just like, oh, don't bring her.
It's a 20-part series.
Yeah, I think it was called X-Men Blue or X-Men Black. I have to look it up again. But do you know?
That's
what
like
I'm
5 minutes of storytelling in the animated series.
I know.
Oh my god.
That's like a commercial break.
So okay, so I have a question then about like the comic canon versus the movies versus because one of my beefs with Magneto, and I'm really thinking about this now, for example, and this is in the movie series, so I don't know if it's in the comics or not, is when Mystique gets hit with the dart and loses her powers, and he totally rejects her because she's not one of them anymore. Like, you're not one of my people, so you're not my problem. Like, that hit me in the feels really hard.
So
that was from X-Men.
Yeah,
that's from the movie. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's
that's
I
from the
don't know if
movie.
it's consistent with the canon, like
With the
in the
comics.
comics. Yeah.
I don't believe so. And I think there's like rumors that did Mystique sleep with Magneto as well? Because like anyway. There's a whole Magneto is a little bit of a
We're feeding
funny.
into the now it's turning into a Me Too
Gambit's
movement
got
opportunity.
Gambit's got like the bad rep for being like a ladies' man, always has been, right? Even like but the problem is that in this series, in the show, they actually made him like he kind of elevated himself a little bit, right? Like he was like, you know what, we're gonna be friends, like it's fine. And he was kind of heartbroken. He watched her walk out of the room and drop the card, and you're like, oh, this guy's kind of he's sticking with it, right? Like that's his friend, that's his partner, and I like that they changed that, because in the series, I don't know if you remember, but he was like a ladies' man, like he's hitting on everybody and all this
He
stuff.
kind of does here
think,
too. There's another woman in that episode he's sort of hitting on. I can't remember who it was.
But isn't it the
might
one
have been
behind the
Madeline
counter?
Pryor, actually.
No.
Was it?
No, Madeline. No. Madeline Pryor is Jean Grey. Like that was just. Oh, by the way, I loved when she like turned into the Goblin Queen. She did the Sharon Stone leg over. See, you know what I'm talking about. Like, and I was like, well, in the comics though, I think it's called Inferno, the comic. It's actually very skimpy, her outfit. So I'm glad they didn't go that route, but they still did the whole thingy thing. And I was like, oh, I see what's happening over here. Anyway,
she's a babe. That transformation.
Yes.
Queen.
She was.
Yes. Sir.
She was badass.
So happy. So badass.
She was definitely badass, but I did love that they made it that sexy scene, but they kind of removed, if you look at the animation, okay, so they used to have like the butts used to be like plumper and the old one and a little bit sexier, and now it's not. So I don't know if that's purposeful, but you can notice that stuff. But that scene, I was like,
what's that like in a production meeting? Can we make their butts less sexy, please?
Yes, it was flatter. Rose's butt was flatter.
Well,
I'm sorry, it was.
Don't you remember though? What game? There was a fighting game in the 90s on one of the video game systems. I feel like you might have even played it at your house as teenager, Steve. But where?
Thank you for bringing that up.
Sorry,
I know where you're going with this. Thank you for bringing that up.
There's one where there's a feature that you could turn on and off of the fighting game that was bouncing breasts.
Yeah, that wasn't X-Men.
No, it wasn't. But I'm just saying, like, as we're talking,
it was a toggle. It was a toggle in the back,
and the aesthetic, and right, yeah.
It was not my game.
No, fair. Yes, fair.
I'm just
saying, like, at that point in our lives when we were that age, I remember that this is how they built kind of the sexuality into stuff like that, right? So now we live in a different world, and it makes sense that they're like,
I know, but there were like certain scenes. I was like, well, are you not making it sexy because it's for kids? Okay, cool. I can accept that argument. But then you're doing the Sharon Stone thing with the Goblin Queen. Then you're doing the horror stuff. So I'm like, pick and choose. Okay, I'm good with Rogue having her ass. I'm good with that. I like that. It was fine. It didn't offend me.
Yeah.
Very much an extreme response to not wanting to offend women, as if women cannot be powerful.
Yeah.
Sexuality.
And plumpy. Can I have an ass and be powerful, please?
And tits, whatever you want. The problem is, like, in the 90s, these men wouldn't let women in the room to be in charge of their own agency. Right.
Yeah.
So now it's like, okay, well, to fix the problem, we need to remove any type of sexualization from a woman. It's like, no, dummy. Like, I can be sexy and still kick ass. We just don't want you exploiting that. It's not a hard equation. So I agree with you, Dina. Just like, can you choose and just stop with the tiptoeing around it? Rogue is inherently sexy, and what makes her sexy is how self-assured she becomes, and how she to accept herself and then finally embrace her power. Madeline Pryor is sexy because of her autonomy, because of her power, but also finding her own and creating her identity and choosing her own path. Emma Frost is sexy because when, instead of being, well, she was exploited her entire life by her dad, the people around her, and not even that, SA'd, sexually assaulted, you know, she found her way back to herself to reclaim her sexuality and still be a badass. So, like, I think when they compromise these elements about these wonderful characters, you take away from them. So I agree with you for sure.
Yeah, I just love Rogue. So I love the scene. Can we just talk a little bit about when the baby was getting delivered and how the doctor wouldn't deliver the baby, and Scott's like, well, can you just like touch the doctor and say
and like absorb the skill?
And the
I was like, wait a minute.
What?
Wait. She okay. I don't want to nitpick because I don't want to nitpick. She absorbed his doctor powers?
Yeah, this is my favorite.
I was like,
and then after that,
what?
she's like, let's get this woman an IV in a room. And I'm like, well, that wasn't skillful. I mean, I want more of this. Tell me something else that you just learned. You killed the man. He's really basically gone. Like, I don't think he's alive anymore. So we sacrificed a life for a life. And then I'm like, but also, Jean Grey, you haven't gone to a doctor not once during your we're just sitting here being motherly with Storm, but I haven't gone to get a scan. Like, all of it is just a little.
And I will say, she didn't kill him because they reference him later in that.
Oh, they do. They do. You're right.
That interviewer goes to, because that's what sets off Scott. The
doctor
goes and says,
we found the doctor.
I went to a doctor. This is how I know you have a kid. And he's like, that guy wouldn't treat my wife.
Yeah, but you know that like part of Rogue's powers is that she takes your memories, like she takes on your memories. So I'm not really sure if like makes you forget, but yeah, that's a good point, Steve, because that is what triggered Scott, and I thought that moment was just gold for me. I loved every minute of it. I'm like injected into my vein. Like, it was like reality TV. You can watch like Jean Grey and Scott, like fighting down the stairs, like walking outside.
Or when she's like, when she was like, can you take your glasses off? And he's like, no. And then when he flips out and she's like, I came so that I could help you uncover the truth. Why would you lie? Like, it was such manipulation. And I was like, oh my gosh.
I love that she got mad that he's talking to her clone that he has a baby with. First of all, like, let's just pump the brakes. You just came in 5 minutes ago. I've been with this woman. For all I know, Madeline Pryor is Jean Grey for
her whole life,
the whole time.
So excuse me for talking to her, right? In the clouds, not even IRL. So, and then she gets mad, and I just thought that was hilarious to me. But anyway, it was just the whole walking out. The cameraman's like trying to capture the image. I just loved it.
And can I say, I know I mentioned this to Raevin too. I said I was fascinated by the scene where Jean gets into Scott's head because he's been speaking with Madeline, and I thought to myself, I thought, okay, now is he cheating? Because that was his wife, but you're his, like, it's such a weird scenario.
Yeah. So weird.
Like, I actually, the guys got my empathy this season, and he never really had it before. I'm
He's
like,
about to snap. He's gonna snap big time. I can't
oh,
wait
he's
to see
this,
that.
this
Scott.
guy's gonna.
Ross made her debut, guys, because she's gonna swoop in and be like, you know what, Scott? They
Oh,
don't.
she's gonna seduce. All the seducing, and it's gonna be amazing. I can't wait.
Oh yeah,
Unless
I'm
if
all
she
for him.
survived the island, she might be
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. If
She might have been in it
survives,
for
yes.
4 minutes.
She
she's
may not
probably
survive
dead,
Jean Grey.
she's pretty like Emma's hard to kill. Like she's pretty tough. Like
Yeah.
she's
The
really
others are
tough.
pretty easy though.
Probably say that.
They actually
mean,
do find her on, you know, like in the comics, they find her, and she was one of the survivors. But whatever. I don't know what they're gonna do with this, but that she is. That is how her and Scott get together and whatever. But yeah, I can't wait. He deserves somebody new. It's time for a fresh start.
You know
For
who
the
I
clone
need?
business.
You know who I need Jean to leave alone with her temperamental emotions is Logan. Because I
Yeah.
Oh my god.
She just strings them
And I'm like,
along, and yeah.
So, my first thought was when they split them into clones, and I don't know, you guys,
I
you
can't.
both have infinitely more comic knowledge than I ever did. But I thought, oh, that's nice. They both have one now. That was my first thought.
Oh
Well,
my
there's the
god.
answer. Like King Solomon, just split the baby in half.
Gee.
It's all good. Like,
You absorb it. You dissolve all the tension if you just clone.
oh my
Goldie's
god.
got one.
Logan. She don't want him. I feel bad for Logan. But you know what? Let's talk about Logan for a second because you want to talk about who keeps getting shafted. It's Logan and stuff
Yeah.
that Logan is a little bitch about it. Like he just presses on, But
Yeah.
I don't like how I always wondered why Logan was attracted to Jean for as long as he was because I like Jean. She's never really been my fave because I feel like she's like Scott. They're just temperamental and kind of privileged and think like, we're the most important people here. Like I can't stand them. But I never understood why he liked her for so long because she treated him so bad and like was never it was like Bella
Hot and cold. Yeah.
yeah, like Bella, Jacob, and what's
Edward.
Edward from
Compare it to
Twilight.
Twilight.
But it is because
Yeah.
she thinks she's like the center of everybody's world and she plays with them and they're just like okay with it. And I don't know. I hate that for Logan. I do.
And I would say Scott's not okay with it, but
Yeah, true. But they stay with her. They keep going back.
he
to
stays with her. He stays with her because she keeps choosing him, and I'm using air quotes deliberately.
Yeah.
Because she's like, I choose you. You know what she is? She's the distracted boyfriend meme. That's what she is. She's got Scott on her arm, and she's looking back like this.
She
and
is.
it's like, oh, honey.
Leave Scott alone. Logan alone. Who you think? What are you saying, Dina? I heard you. I think you cut out there.
I just listen. I know. I think he's bored, and I think Scott can be boring, whatever. But you have to understand, this is a woman that he could take off his visor, doesn't murder. The story is sweet, right? He, like he was with her. They kissed. They made love. They had a child. Like he has no other. So like, let's leave him be. She
with
gave
a
him
clone.
Well,
but he didn't know that, and the clone didn't know that as the clone. Like it's not like somebody was the only deceptive person in that triangle was Dr. Sinister. Oh, yeah,
Sinister is all part of the plan,
right?
Yeah. I mean, listen, at least he got something, right? Like poor Scott. Anyway, let's leave him be. He's about to snap and become
he got a son
bad.
that he had to give up. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so the son part was sad.
Yeah,
was devastating.
I actually teared up in that scene.
Yeah.
I teared up in that moment.
Listen,
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god. He's like, I can't be here, and you have to walk out. And I was like, oh my god.
Do you know how it feels to grow up abandoned? I'm like, oh, Scott.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Beast is just going to kick him in the groin in episode 6, and that's
That's
going
it.
to push him over the
He
edge.
will have completed his arc.
That's it.
And
The
he
arc,
can die
the
in
arc's
peace.
done.
Like that's it.
Yeah.
Talk about Morph, my guy.
Oh, he is amazing.
Morph's been great.
Yeah.
And I like that they're finally exploring his preferences of men and possibly women, but right now I think he's just looking at Logan. I love that because on TikTok, I don't know if you guys are, I know you two are not on TikTok. I mean, you're kind of our Steve, but not as much as I am. Dina, are you on TikTok?
We're on TikTok right now. You can follow us at Screenfish Online on TikTok right now. Anyway, so go ahead.
I do not consent. I'm kidding. I don't consent.
But the toxic fanboys on TikTok are not happy that Morph is apparently, I mean, seemingly bisexual. And I'm
I thought
like,
they were non-binary.
well, I don't know if he's non-binary because I don't know if it's explicitly come out and said what his orientation is.
They
Oh.
haven't used the words.
Because he's been
Okay.
because he's been eyeing Logan and flirting with Logan, the suspicion is that he's bisexual. And the toxic fanboys on TikTok and online are like, oh my God, why are we still being so woke? Why is he bisexual? But it's like, Morph can be anybody. Why would you assume that he is for the binary? Like, that's something that they assumed and kind of projected onto this character.
I think it was reported on. That's why I remember seeing that. I don't know if it was a news thing or if it was when the show was coming out, but I remember that being reported on. But it wasn't mentioned, so I don't know. But I love morphing into the different characters, making fun of Jean Grey. Like, that was my favorite in the club with the pregnant belly.
Yeah.
So funny.
I love
That was
Morph.
like the perfect thing that Morph could do. So no, I think it's all good. It's all the characters are well played. Bishop too, because Bishop is newly added, obviously, and so I think the whole concept of time travel, we'll get that through him a bit more, and Cable, of course. But I like that concept. So we'll see.
I think to Raven's point, I think this is one of the reasons why culture needs the return of the X-Men, done well, because I think the response to Morph is so ridiculous for this day and age.
Yeah.
Of like, but the whole point of the X-Men is like you're talking about the backstory of Emma Frost. You're talking about the backstory of Magneto. You're talking about these characters are coming from real world oppressive angles, and all the show's trying to say is they all matter.
Yeah.
That's it. They matter for who they are. And it's like, and fanboy response to a character like Morph, I think, is so like plays so much into that. Like, you hear that and it's like, why is this okay? This is what we're fighting about with something that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
It actually, like, this is actually plays right into what the X-Men vibe is all about, and it's what I appreciate about the series. Well, and
I was just going to say, like, I think it really ties back to a comment that you made earlier that kind of slipped under the radar, but I think is so powerful, as we were having kind of the discussion around like oppression and who's right and who's wrong, and nobody is ever perfectly right or perfectly wrong. But you said it's not about like making room at the table. It's about building a new and different table. And I thought that was like super powerful. And it reminded me a lot of like, so Brene Brown says, like, belonging is the opposite of fitting in. Because in fitting in, I have to conform in order to be accepted as part of the group, right? Making room at the table for me means I have to conform. But belonging is the build a new table, right? And so I think to your point about like, hey, like everybody comes from some seriously painful backgrounds, right? Like, I don't think there is a single horribly that it reflects in the truth of like our world, right? Is you don't know what people have been through, and I don't know that there's very many people on this earth that haven't been through some pretty horrible things at one point or another. Some folks very sadly, repetitively, without respite from that. But, yeah, go ahead.
I know I said Scott.
Right.
Scott.
Kicking the groin.
But, right.
Yeah.
But I think again, like we need to start thinking differently. And to your point, like sometimes you shake your head, you're like, come on, it's 2024. Are we really stuck in this like binary gender thinking? Like, come on, we should be past that now. Or when we see like the conversation we were having about like women can't be sexy and powerful and strong, and just we better take the sexy way. Like these tropes that we seem to just get stuck in. And I think the power of X-Men 97, because it is animated, is it makes it safer to talk about because it's an animated series. So we can start to help people break some of those like thinking boxes that we're stuck in, right?
And I think with that in mind, though, and this is, and I'll even say too, I think this is maybe maybe one of the flaws in Xavier's argument is he's still trying to get a seat at the table.
Yeah.
But you have to have both sides be willing to build a new table. So
Mhm.
you can try and get that, to Raven's point about control. You want to get a seat at the table for people that are literally trying to limit you the whole time.
Mhm.
Want something from you.
They want something from you. So
Yeah.
if you start, if you can both come in and say, I see the value in you here, and I see the value in you here, what can we do together, and how is it going to be different?
Mhm.
I think that's when you can start to build a new table. But that's the whole thing. This is not the podcast we're doing this week, but you should, hopefully we'll be doing it in a couple of weeks. Civil War opened this weekend, and it is fascinating, and
Yeah.
it is just a world split in half,
Mm.
and it and keeps itself relatively neutral in terms, it doesn't say that the issue is this or the issue is that. It's just that they're fighting each other.
Mm.
And this X-Men's not that different.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think X-Men is different because I think X-Men is clearly making a clear statement, and I think it always has. Um, but I think with the show now, some of the toxic fanboy response is reflective of how the show failed in the 90s, because using oppression as a metaphor is great, but when you put white faces on the oppression, it's not very clear who you're talking about. You're not really holding space to really empathize with the people who this is actually about, right? Then you just end up telling everybody in the world you're all equally oppressed and you can all equally be heroes if you go this route to resolve the oppression of that the mutants face. So I love X-Men because it's always going to be good conversation starter. It's always going to be a good place to lean into, have so many different perspectives. But I don't think X-Men is like Civil War in that way, because X-Men is making a clear statement. You know who the bad guys are, and it's always the humans. Even the humans that are allies are at times problematic. So that's why I just don't agree with that part that you said, because Civil War, as you know how I feel with Civil War, maybe I'll watch it if you really convince me, but I'm not super into movies that reflect our current political climate without being very clear with who the aggressor is. Because in our climate today, we know who the aggressors are. So when you do that, you take away from the possibility of change or healing. And I find movies like Oppenheimer or Civil War, those kind of films to me are like, I kind of feel like exploitative in a way, because we're already going through it in real time. So, or we've already gone through it in history. Why are you trying to retell it to us as if we don't know? Like, what are you supposed to take away from that? But yeah, that's where I think the difference is between X-Men and that film, at least.
I would love to hear your thoughts on Civil War, but that's another podcast for another day.
Another podcast.
Another podcast for another day. We could do this all night, I'm sure, unless we pass out from exhaustion, but I think we should, I think this is a good place for us to reel it in. Let's screen it or skip it. X-Men 97, screen it or skip it.
Screen it.
Screen it. Yeah.
Screen it.
It really is good.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's mature, it's well told, it's energetic, sometimes too energetic. But anyway, I don't know if I'm the target audience or not. I think I am, because it's 97, but then I realized I'm like, it is a kid's cartoon. But anyway, that's it, but it also is, I don't know.
But the pace of media today has shortened our attention span. So
True.
if anything, accelerating the storylines makes sense, because we would get bored and disengage and pick up our phones and do a million other things otherwise, right? Like, you ever watch a really old, I mean, there's a couple of old movies I absolutely adore, but you go back to the really old movies and it feels painfully slow to us now.
I know.
Right?
I know. You're like, oh
Yeah.
my God, forever.
But I will throw back at this. WandaVision, for example, was beautifully told, and it took its time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like it would give you a
Yeah.
tease in the first episode that wouldn't pay off till the fifth. Now, again, different style.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I felt this way about the old series anyway. It's just a petty knock. I think the series is fantastic. It's so great.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Everybody should
Oh,
watch.
go ahead.
No, I just said everybody should watch. Just agreed with you. Everybody watch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can't wait to see where it goes. Thank you all so much for being a part of this. I love our conversations. I really, really do. We always have great ones. And a reminder that you can find us wherever podcasts are available. You can like and subscribe to us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can go to the website at screenfish.net. And as I said, we have lots of great interviews on our YouTube and podcast channels for industry professionals that each week for new and upcoming projects, as well as Screenfish Radio, just like this, where we have amazing conversations about films and shows that matter. Thank you all three so much. It is so wonderful to chat with you, and for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.